Celebrated marketing chief Mika Yamamoto confronts her deepest fears and reclaims her truest, most beautiful truths.
In a lot of friendships or personal relationships that I had, I actually thought if someone was unkind to me that I deserved it. That for some reason, I must have done something wrong and I must have done something to deserve being mistreated. And so I accepted a lot of bad behavior from people.
Hello, welcome to A Change Mindset. I'm your host, June Love Young, and this podcast is about what it takes to push through fear and face change head on. We'll learn from change agents who've led extraordinary transformations in their life, their work, and the world. I hope their stories inspire you to be the agent of change your life deserves. This is A Change Mindset. Well, hello, agents of change. I hate to make promises I can't keep, so I don't take lightly what I'm about to say. People, this episode of A Change Mindset is a revelation. Mika Yamamoto is a revelation. But before I get to that promise, there's something I'd like to say. I want to say thank you. Thank you for listening to A Change Mindset. Thank you for creating space in your busy life and cluttered podcast library for this little podcast from Seattle. My coworkers and I at Zoom Communications feel so compelled to do this work because we believe in the world that we're in right now and everything that's going on. We need to talk more about change and get smarter about how to react to change, how to manage change, and most importantly, how to lead change in ourselves and in the worlds that we inhabit. And we hope that by listening to A Change Mindset, you will be inspired to lead those changes in your life and also to tell your change story. To be honest, when we launched this podcast a couple of weeks ago, we had no idea who would join us. And here you are. You are here, and we're so grateful that you have joined this conversation, and we're excited that you're resonating with the stories that we've told so far. Thank you for the fan mail that you've sent in. We just love hearing your stories and your feedback and ideas for guests and topics. Please keep it up. Send us email. Just check out achangemindset.com, and also follow us on Instagram at A Change Mindset. And please do subscribe and follow us on Apple and Spotify. And if I may, I'd like to ask you for a favor. At the end of this episode, would you go to Apple Podcast and leave us a review? Not only are we so interested in your feedback, but leaving a review and rating this podcast helps us get the word out so that other people who are navigating change can find this resource. Okay? All right. Thank you for doing that. All right, now back to Mika Yamamoto. So I've known Mika for over a decade, since working together at Microsoft way back when. Watching her career soar, I am not only in awe of this amazing person, but honestly, I am goaded by feelings of inadequacy. And I guarantee there are a bunch of folks listening to this right now who are nodding their heads and saying, yep, same here. Considered a leading voice in digital marketing, Mika has held executive roles at Amazon, SAP, Adobe, Marketo, and she currently serves as Chief Marketing Officer at F5. In this episode, Mika shares a precious gift with you today, something that's taken her a lifetime to uncover, her real self. Mika Yamamoto is a revelation. And here's the promise I want to make to you. If you lean in and really listen deeply to what Mika has to say, it will transform the way you think about yourself and the way that you inhabit your life. I know that's what it's done for me, and I hope it can do the same for you. Okay, so I'm reading through your bio a little bit, Mika, and my jaw is dropping because you've just have done so much. You've accomplished so much in your young life. And so I guess my first question for you is, how did you become this way? How did you become this powerhouse, amazing, leader, executive, mom? Where does this come from?
I've thought about that question a lot. I get to live this life. I get to work and be privileged to get to work with people like you and get to, be a leader in an amazing company like F5. And because of a lot of the stories that I tell in my head, especially, I think, wow, how did this happen? I don't feel often bold and I don't often feel like this confident, wow, I can do all these things. I grew up as an only child and I spent a lot of time alone. And I think back on most of my life feeling like I was an outsider, feeling a complete lack of sense of self and a complete lack of sense of belonging and just feeling just kind of unworthy. As I dove into work, that became a sense of, belonging and a sense of structure and a sense of accomplishment and a sense of self in my professional self that I felt like was more of a true north than maybe how I felt outside of work for many, many years.
So how did you get into business?
There's some key influential families that I had in my life, 4 specifically, actually. And one of them came into my life at the beginning of high school. And the dad the mom and dad were from Guyana. And the dad was a CEO of a company that he bought for $1. And it was a mining company, it was a coal mining company. And he started from nothing. And just was this amazing demonstration of hard work and perseverance could get you could become anything. And he had this combination of work ethic and love for life and love for his family and tradition that really inspired me. And so I was like, I just want to be a CEO. And I had no idea what a CEO was. Like I grew up in my mom was in retail. My dad was a barber. So I had no idea what white collar life was like. But if that's what being a CEO was like, then I wanted to be one. So I had that pegged in my head that I remember thinking I was bagging groceries when I was like 16 at Safeway thinking, someone asked me what I wanted to be. And I was like, I want to be a CEO, not having any idea what that meant. But he embodied this human that I really aspired to be like because I admired him so much.
Wow, what a huge influence he had on your life. Mika, something that you said earlier caught my attention. I heard you say that growing up as an only child, you felt like you didn't belong and that you felt unworthy. Would you tell us more about that?
I was really disconnected with my parents. Like my parents expected great grades. They expected me to uphold the family name, and those were big expectations. But other than that, we didn't really talk, and we didn't really, talk about what's your dreams, what do you hope to be? And there wasn't conversations about who's your friend and how are you feeling. My dad was verbally and physically abusive to all of us. And so I was terrified of him and just didn't have any connection with him. And so if you feel like you don't belong in your family and you don't feel safe in your own family, I think it's really hard in the outside world to actually feel like you have any tethering, because I don't think you have any sense of feeling like I had a grounding and a consistency and a home base where I felt safe. Of course, I didn't realize that's how I was feeling as a kid. I just remember feeling really sad and lonely and like an outsider and like I just didn't belong. And I watched, these 4 families I mentioned. I just so aspired to have that connection. And I watched how they were just unconditionally there for one another. Even if they were disagreeing with one another, they were there.
Right.
And they had this joy and this connection and the sense of tradition and belonging and responsibility to one another that I thought was really, really special and amazing, and something that I think that's what became an inspiration to figure things out.
So, Mika, where does your change story begin?
Well, I think it starts with my childhood in just feeling untethered and like I didn't belong, and got me in this situation where I just felt like I was unworthy of people really loving me, and that I didn't trust that anyone who would care about me really did. And I thought they would go away. And I, built this construct where it was a self-fulfilling construct where I would build relationships with people who weren't trustworthy. I didn't have a sense of self, but I felt like if anyone knew how insecure and how unloved I felt, that they would reject me. I think what needed to change was just me realizing who I am, right? And understanding that I had to understand the difference between who I am versus who other people expect me to be. And also accepting the fact that if I showed up as who I am, people wouldn't go away. And I didn't have super tight relationships, but of the relationships I had, I was afraid they'd go away and that they would reject me. And I so badly just wanted to belong.
Yeah. What an important internal change. And I think something that a lot of people, including myself, can relate to. How did you become aware that this is something you needed to do?
I worked with some bosses. This one woman, Deborah, who was one of the most iconic people in my career because I think she saw things in me that I never saw in myself and she made me believe. But she knew me pretty well. And we were in a meeting once with really senior execs at a bank. And she was like, you were acting really weird. Like, why are you acting so serious and so weird? And I thought I just had to act serious because, there's no way that they would accept me at that table if I were just not serious and professional and very buttoned up. And she's like, you were there because you were Mika and, you didn't come as yourself. And so you made the whole meeting very awkward for everybody. And so it was this realization that I don't have to act like somebody else. I got there because I was me. And so I should act like myself. So it was this realization, and part of the change journey was just grounding myself and taking a step back and going, okay, well, who do you think you are? And how do you be true to that person that you are? And if you're in an environment where they're not accepting you for who you are, facing that fear of rejection and thinking, well, actually, if you reject me for who I am, then this is probably not a good match, whether it's a personal relationship or whether it's work, getting a grounding in who you are, but then realizing that if someone is going to reject who you are, it doesn't make you a bad person. Right. And I always felt like because I was unworthy and unlovable, that someone rejected me, I would take it personally, like I was bad because I always felt bad and a sense of shame for who I was. And so realizing actually, if you're going to reject me, that's okay. So be it. I'm doing the best I can. And if that's not good enough and if that's a bad fit, then this isn't a fit again, and not taking that personally, just more taking it as, this just isn't a good combination.
Buried our differences out in the yard, next to the tall grass beside the barn. We sang songs to send them on their way.
Okay, so you've described this change journey as really a move towards accepting who you are and confronting this assumption and this fear that if you do show up as your real self, that people would reject you, and just dismantling all that shame. Was there like a pivotal moment that really galvanized all this for you?
There was. I grew up with knowing these, 4 influential families that really solidified to me what belonging and togetherness and family and tradition could be like. And I always promised to myself that someday I was going to have a family like that. And that if I got the privilege of having kids, that's how they were going to grow up and they were going to feel that way. And I reached this point in my life where actually doctors said, you'll never have kids. And my whole life has been this series of never say never. And lo and behold, a few years later, I, had 3 kids within 2.5 years.
Oh my gosh. What?
And, so it's like, go big or go home. You're not going to have kids. And then, well, guess what? I guess you're going to. And I was like, I promised to myself that I was going to create this environment where those kids felt love and acceptance and that they could do anything that they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so that's what I, built in this, this family construct that I built for them. And then there was one time when my parents came to visit for Quinn, our middle son's birthday. And we were sitting around the dinner table and my father was actually disparaging what I did for a living. And he was being really not very kind about what I was doing. And he was insulting what I was doing for a living, thought it was really stupid and a waste of time. And my mother was standing up for me and he would turn to her and he would yell at her. And it's all my kids. And this is my child's, like my son's birthday dinner. And he would turn to her and he would shut her down and shut her up. In the meantime, he was sitting next to our youngest son who was doing something he didn't like. And he turned to him and told him to stop. And Carson didn't stop. And then he turned again to my son and said, you know what I used to do to your mother when she would do that? He was like, I used to hit her. And he took his hand and he like went within an inch of his face. And I stood up and I had walked, like on eggshells around that man, just making sure that he never blew up, that things were calm, and that I just was never a trigger if I could avoid it for any type of outburst, just because it was just scary. And so, which led to this feeling of not being safe, just because it just wasn't, because you just never knew when something was going to blow up. And I realized, you know what, I was watching my kids and I was thinking, my kids will not experience this, and this is not okay. And I never want my kids to think that this type of behavior is okay. So I stood up and I said, that's enough. And I said, in my house, you do not act like that. And we do not treat each other with disrespect.
Yeah.
I've seen enough of this in your house. This is my house. And he was in shock. He got up and he turned around, got to the door, and he turned around and he said, I never want to see you again in my life. He's like, I never want you to be a part of my life. And he disowned me in that moment. And I said, okay. And he left, and that was it.
Was this the first time you ever stood up to him?
Yeah, ever. Because I would just take it. Like, we would just take it till it was over and then just hope, or I would hide, but I'd never ever stood up to him. So yeah, that was the first time I stood up to him and the last time I ever talked to him.
Expectation is the currency of fools. I spent it on you. I spent it on you. Tell me once more. Speak to my chest.
Take us back to that moment in your house when you're seeing these things. What was happening inside that gave you the courage to finally say stop? Like, walk us through the feelings.
It was less about, honestly, about standing up for me, and it was more standing up for my kids. I just, something broke in my head or popped open in my head to say, wow, I got to see it almost through their eyes. And I realized how terrible it was. Yeah. It was so normal for me, but it just, for whatever I felt when I was growing up, my kids are not going to feel that way. Like, I can't make it okay for them to see this. I never want my kids to think that this is okay, both in how they're being treated, but especially in how they treat others, right? I mean,
yes.
And I never want them to think that it's okay to be disrespectful in that way to anybody. If I didn't say anything, I would be making it okay. Like, he justified acting this way because he was mistreated as a kid.
Yeah.
Right. And he had a terrible childhood. He was living on his own when he was in ninth grade. So he was in ninth grade education. Then he went to go live on his own and he ran away from home. And you think if you're in ninth grade, then that takes you to 14. So his life was really terrible for 14 years. But at this point, he's now, in his 60s. And so for another, 46, he was just as miserable, and he just essentially punished everyone he knew for that time. And I think that's how it perpetuates itself, right? It's like, well, I was mistreated, so this is my excuse for mistreating other people. And I was like, I will not be that way. I am not going to treat anybody that way. And my kids can't think this is okay. And so it was breaking the cycle of bad behavior, which is hard to do when that's all you know. And I think that's how it perpetuates itself in families where, you go from one violent family and one like crazy, situation to another, and that's what you know. So you perpetuate it. And that's just what I consciously said I wasn't going to do for my kids.
So in what way did this moment with your dad galvanize the change that you were wanting to make in yourself?
Well, it was this realization that, look, what do I want? Like, what do I want in my friendships and my connections and my personal world? And that was there was power in making sure that my kids knew that this wasn't okay, where I should have known a long time ago that actually it wasn't okay for me either to face that and to deal with that environment. But because I was motivated to do a lot of things for my kids, actually, I need to actually realize what my boundaries are and what I should accept and what's okay for me to experience, not just my kids, but for me to experience. And so I started from that moment putting more boundaries for myself,
wow.
In terms of the type of mistreatment I would expect, because I didn't, in a lot of friendships or personal relationships that I had, I actually thought if someone was unkind to me that I deserved it, that for some reason, like I must have done something wrong and I must have done something to deserve being mistreated. And so I accepted a lot of bad behavior from people.
That's what you were taught.
That's what I was taught, that I probably deserved it somehow. Like I deserved somehow my dad being super violent and mean. Like I probably did something wrong and I wasn't a good enough kid. And, I just wasn't good enough to actually have love and be in a safe environment. And so I perpetuated that belief in myself. And then in that moment, when I stood up to my dad, I realized I did it for the sake of my kids. I realized I actually deserve that too. And in making those boundaries or seeking that path, some people wouldn't be in my life anymore, right? People who got a lot of joy out of being unkind to others or talking about others or undercutting others, those people I just didn't have in my life anymore, although they were part of a crowd that was like a laudable, like, I don't know, popular people. I'll be unpopular. I'd rather be alone than be lonely in a situation with people where I feel like I don't belong. And then I realized it wasn't that I didn't belong because I was unworthy. I just didn't belong because I just didn't align with their values. And so realizing that difference was huge for me.
Wow.
Because I always felt I didn't belong because I just was unworthy and unlovable. And it's realizing the difference of the situation where I didn't belong because I just didn't respect these people and I didn't respect their values. But it didn't mean that I was unlovable or unworthy. It just meant this isn't a match. Like we don't see eye to eye, and that's okay. And I was realizing that was okay. Those were big moments for me, just to kind of realize where I fit and where I didn't.
You don't say you love me, so I'll do the same. You don't say you love me, so I'll do the same.
I feel like we started this conversation with me gushing about your amazing career, but now that you share the story, I have such a deeper respect for who you are. I just think about how different you and your dad are, that even though you both experienced a horrible childhood, that you chose a different path, that you decided that you weren't going to perpetuate this violence and instead protect your children.
Yeah. I mean, you just, when you have these little humans, all your job is to protect them and make sure that they're okay and make sure that they're good human beings. And you realize that they're there and they love you right back. Right. I mean, kids love their parents for all their imperfections. And, my kids think I'm absolutely crazy, but, they still hang out with me on purpose, and they're, 17, 18, and 19 now. And they helped teach me this sense of connection and tethering. And, you can falter and you can fail and you can have bad moments, but you can come together and say, can we start over?
Yes.
And with each child, I have this different way that we start over. With my youngest son, we ever since he was really little, we had this, we touch thumbs, and can we start over and go boop, and we touch our thumbs together. And then we take a deep breath and we start again. And it's just realizing, look, I messed up. And it's sometimes we're starting over because I messed up. Sometimes we're starting up because something didn't happen well with him. But we realize you can start over, but you're still there. You still show up.
A thumb reset.
Yeah, it's like a little, and he'd be really sad. And we'd have these imaginary bananas in his pocket that I would put sprinkles on before he left because he was sad. And I was like, just take out your bananas. And he'd take them out of these pretend bananas out of his pocket. And I would put sprinkles on them and he'd put them back in his pocket. And it was just this little connection and this little moment of you're going to be okay because you got your imaginary sprinkle bananas in your pocket. But it was this sense of connection that they essentially taught me. They taught me a lot. I think I've learned more from them than they've ever learned from me in being a good person.
It sounds like ever since you stood up to your dad, that standing up has become a theme for your life.
It's stand up. A big part of it is also the theme is showing up, right? So it's, if this is the life I want, which is one that is feeling like I, make this world better and feeling connected and feeling like I have a sense of, accountability to others, knowing that this isn't happening to me. Right. I mean, this is I happen to the world and I can actually affect the world, and how I show up and give to the world is the energy that I get back. And that sounds kind of cheesy, but it's true. The more I give of myself and put myself out there unapologetically, as crazy or weird and uncoordinated and silly and quirky as I am, the more I get back. And so it was not just standing up. It was, maybe it's standing up in the form of showing up.
Yes.
Showing up as the human I want to be, showing up in the way that is the best of me and the best that I can bring in all my imperfections. And in that, I show what what I accepting of and what I am not accepting of. And the not accepting is, if someone is unkind or disrespectful or untrustworthy or, not doing their best.
Yeah, because part of showing up is showing up as your whole self.
Right.
And your whole self includes boundaries.
Yeah.
So for anyone out there listening who are, in a similar space in terms of a big dragon that they need to defeat, whether it's internal or external, but it's just so scary to do so. What's your message to them, Mika?
I think the message is, take stock of who you are and, you are who you are and be unapologetic about who that person is. I think every human here is on this planet is worthy of love and connection. That love and connection may not happen with everybody. And to realize that that's okay, right? And your tribe is out there and your people are out there. I think you've got to be honest with yourself on who you are. Who you are is who you are. And, there's some warts and wrinkles and, you can be the best that you are, regardless of your past. That doesn't have to necessarily paint your path for the future. You don't need to repeat history. I think it's just a peaceful, powerful place to be, is to just show up as you are with your true authentic self and then take what happens after, which is some people will leave your life, but the people that are in your life actually are the ones who will always be there, right? That you can count on and that you can trust and that they are your true village because look, they've seen every crazy, silly, happy, tearful, bad moment, and they're still there. And they're there because of who you are versus who you're projecting yourself to be. And so I think finding that village and finding that tribe is incredibly grounding. So I'd just say, again, just be bold to be who you are. It's scary because, sometimes that's not, you don't see things that are pretty in yourself when you do realize that, but you realize that actually you can change those things too.
Mika, you are such a gift, my friend.
Sweet.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your deepest of stories, your most real self today. I'm so grateful that you did because I know that your change story will inspire and give hope to others. And I want to say thank you for modeling authentic, vulnerable leadership. I believe the world and business in particular could be more life-giving if more people like you showed up as their real selves.
Thank you, June. Thank you. I just so appreciate you. You're an inspiration. So thank you.
Coming up, we reflect on this change story and how you might apply it to your own life. Gosh, there is so much in this episode that we could talk about. So much to unpack. But I want to keep this brief. So Mika's story reminds me that one of the toughest changes to lead is shifting your negative beliefs about who you are and how you should show up in the world. Can you relate to this? I mean, I know I can. I think one of the greatest tragedies facing humanity today is this epidemic of self-doubt, self-abandonment, and even self-hate. It's tragic to me that most of us, regardless of where we come from or how we grew up, that we eventually learn that it's best for us to hide our real selves. Isn't that horrible? Like, how is that okay? In Mika's case, she grew to believe that if people knew her real self, they would reject her. And sadly, that's exactly what happens when she finally summons the courage to stand up to her father and say, that's enough. He doesn't like this. He doesn't like the real Mika, and immediately disowns her. But that moment when she is disowned by her father also becomes the moment she starts owning herself, her true self. So let me ask you this. What's keeping you from owning your true self, from accepting all of who you are? Who do you need to stand up to? What do you need to stand up for? Where does your change story begin? Agents of change, I leave you with this. You are enough. Turn away from those voices inside and out that tell you to be silent, to be small, to be someone else. And tune in to the voice within you that speaks with deepest truth that who you are is not something to hide, but someone to celebrate. What I said to Mika, I say now to you. You, my friend, are a gift to this world, exactly as you are. Until next time, go in peace. Thank you for listening to today's episode of A Changed Mindset. If you want to be inspired to lead change in your own life, head over to achangedmindset.com, where you can find more resources, tips, music, and a place where you can share your own change story. And please follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your pods, because you do not want to miss the amazing episodes coming up. A Changed Mindset is brought to you by Zoom Communications, with music by Towers.